Why Airbnb beats HMO every single time. If you haven't seen the last video that I created on how I scaled my business from 0 to 100K per month in Airbnb, go back and watch it. And if you did, you'll know I had a HMO, and before I put my first tenants in there, I pivoted and I moved it on to an Airbnb strategy. Why did I do that? And that's what this video is about. I'm going to talk about why Airbnb, in my opinion, beats HMO every single time. So before we get into the pros and the cons and what's this and what's that, I just want to explain really, really simply in my words, what is a HMO and what is an Airbnb. I'm going to cover that super quick. I know you guys probably already know that, but just for the context of this video, I want to talk about what is a HMO. A HMO is house of multiple occupation, where you have some form of building and you splice it up into however many rooms, usually something like 6 rooms, and people live in each of these rooms and they share a kitchen facility. Sometimes they share toilet facilities, things like that, but they usually, they just share a communal and kitchen space. So that's a HMO. It stands for house of multiple occupation. And there are 4 ways in my head, simple terms. I know there's probably more, but just to keep things simple, there are 4 ways of doing a HMO. And these are the 4 ways. So number 1, like I did in my first video, I explained that we bought this house in Doncaster. It cost me £90,000 and it was a 4-bedroom house, and we were going to take one of the lounges and turn it into a 5-bedroom HMO. That was the plan. So it wasn't a full refurb. It was just making it compliant. Okay. But that's option 1, is just to buy a house, make it compliant. Yeah. So this is the easy version. Yeah. This is number 1, make it compliant and then rent out the rooms. Yeah. And then rent it out. Now, each of the rooms is going to rent out for whatever the market demands in that area. So just for argument's sake, I'm going to use 700. I don't think that's the going rate in Doncaster. I'm no longer talking about Doncaster, but I know most of my friends in the industry doing around 700. So let's just say you rent a room out, it goes for 700, and it is a self-contained way of living. So if you're living in a HMO, you've got 5, or, in this example, there's 6 rooms. You've got 5 other people living in your house, sharing your kitchen space, sharing, communal space. Hopefully you all get on la-di-da. Okay, so that's option 1. You're just buying a house, you're making it compliant. You're not doing anything wild or wacky or crazy. Option 2 is, yes, buy a house. Yeah, but this time you're going to rip it to shreds. You're going to do full conversion. You're going to take the walls, the floors out. You're going to take every bathroom out, kitchens, all of that nonsense. So what you view is not actually what you're gonna end up with. You're gonna take it literally back to brick, and then your architect's gonna come in and do some really nice work and gonna plot it all out into the most efficient way to probably squeeze in, this time, maybe 7 rooms. Okay, so with each £700, you can get more income. So that is the option 1, is just to buy a normal house and make it compliant, fire doors and signage and maybe a panel, things like that. That's what I did in Doncaster. Buying a house and doing a full conversion is your second option. So what is option number 3? Well, 3 and 4 are getting a little bit complex. I'm not going to spend too much time on them. But option 3 is you could do a new build. Okay, you could do a new build. You could take some brownfield, greenfield site, whatever. You do a purpose-built HMO. That's often a bigger project. And then number 4 is you could do some form of commercial conversion. This one I love, but I don't do HMOs. Why? Because we'll get onto it, but I think Airbnb is better. Anyway, commercial conversion and new build. You all know what new build is. You take an empty bit of land with some trees on it, and then you knock the trees down, and you're in everybody's bad books because you build a great big building that houses lots of people. Okay? It's new build, commercial conversion. Now, this is a really nice one. This is where you take an old pub, an old office, an old church. Yeah, let's just say church building, whatever. And then you turn it into a HMO. Much more complex, much more, I would say experienced strategy. But in my head, that's the sort of 4 ways that you could do HMO. All right. Now, all of those are buying. Of course, there is the option to rent. So I'm going to add that as option number 5. You could just rent a house and then basically make it compliant and do what you do there. Okay. So that is kind of an option of number 1. Instead of buying it, you could rent to rent. Why am I adding rent to rent? Because over here, I just want, for clarity's sake, to compare. What is an Airbnb? So we know what HMO is. So what is an Airbnb? Very quickly, it is some form of building, or these days it could be a glamping pod, it could be a school bus that's converted into an apartment, whatever. It's some form of residential style, I can sleep there building. But let's just for now use it as like a house or a farmhouse. Let's just stick to a house. Okay, let's just stick to a house. And what do you do there? Well, the house is exactly as it is. So in the same sense, it might have all of these different rooms and you just rent the whole house. Okay, you're just going to rent the whole house. You're not splicing it up, splitting it up like this. But there are a few ways to do Airbnb. And just for clarity, number one, you could just buy a house as it is. You could do. Very similar to this one. Number two, you could do some form of renovation. Yeah, you could do some form of renovation. Number three, of course, you could do a new build. I don't know anyone that's just new build Airbnbs. That's a bit random, but you could. I just want to compare it to this for now. Number four, you could do commercial conversion. So take a church, turn it into an apartment, and then rent it out as an Airbnb. So commercial conversion. And number five, you could do rent to rent. So that is just taking a house. This is the most popular way, or this one and this one. No one tends to do this, and lots of developers will do that, and then maybe their exit is Airbnb. Airbnb is more like the end strategy, okay? But just so we've got some clarity, these are the two strategies in short. This one you would book and pay for by the night. This one you live in, okay? Whether it's you or if you're the owner, your tenants live in. If you're the owner, your guests stay in by the night. Key definition. So this one is I live there, okay? And this one is I pay to stay like a hotel, okay? Like a hotel. And that's your guest or, sorry, I've made brackets. I'm gonna make brackets, yeah. So that's your guest or your tenant, okay? So why am I doing this? Because each one of these has their pros and cons. The purpose of this video for me is why Airbnb beats HMO every single time. Now, when I started in property, as you'll know from that other video, and if you haven't yet watched it, here's the link, go and watch it. It's how I scaled my business from 0 to 100. Okay, what I did is I bought a house and I was making it compliant. And I spent the money, we spent the money and we made it compliant. And we were just about to rent it out. And then I decided to pull the plug on the HMO plan. And I really bought into this strategy over here. Now, there's reasons that I did that, and that's what I want to talk about now. Why did I pull from HMO over here to Airbnb? I'm just going to jot some things down in the middle here, and I'm going to give you on either side what happens with Airbnb, what happens with HMO, okay? And the first reason for me was this. As you know, this strategy houses tenants. They live here. This strategy houses guests. There are no tenants. So I don't have too many colors left. This one does tenants, this one doesn't do tenants, okay? Why I don't like tenants? I do not like tenants because you spend all of your hard-earned cash, your time, your energy, your sleepless nights in property, getting your property to standard, whether it's this one or this one, whether it's this strategy or one of these strategies. Then a tenant comes along, and they have all the rights to do whatever they want in your house within reason. And that includes not cleaning up, it includes damaging the place, damaging the walls, damaging the bathroom. It might just be that they don't clean up after themselves in the bathroom, and therefore the steam causes mold, causes things to just go bad over time. So I don't like tenants, one, because they're in your property for a minimum of 6 months. And that is a sweet spot of time where things start to go bad. Things start to fall apart, things need maintenance. But whilst a tenant is in your house, yes, you're doing inspections, but you can't properly see the space until that tenant has gone. Let's face it, you can't see the space properly until that tenant has gone. By the time you get it back, a lot of the time, the place is not how it looked when you gave it to the tenant. Okay, so what's going on over here? We don't have tenants. Who do we have? We have guests. Okay, but what about guests wrecking the place? Well, first of all, guests are not going to be in there for 6 months without someone going in and doing a clean. We clean every 2 weeks, which means our cleaner goes in every 2 weeks and we get direct reports back on how the condition is, how the guests are looking after the place, all of that, right? So that's why I like guests. Most of the time, they're not in there for anywhere near 6 months. If you're doing contractor stays, they usually book in 2 to 4 weeks at a time, and yes, they extend, and yes, it could even eclipse 6 months, for sure. But the key thing is, we're sending a cleaner in every 2 weeks, okay? We're getting the property back to standard. So that's the first reason When I decided not to do our HMO in Doncaster, that was it. Tenants. I was like, I don't even like tenants. I don't want to deal with tenants. I certainly didn't want to deal with tenants in the demographic that we had in this sort of lower to mid-range HMO in Doncaster. You can sort of get the vibe. I was like, I don't want to deal with those kind of tenants. I'm just going to run into headache. I don't want to do it. I would rather deal with engineers that are coming to this Doncaster house to stay in my Airbnb for, at times, don't get me wrong, we've had bookings even longer than 6 months, but I can keep it in hotel standard every 2 weeks, okay? Don't get me wrong, some contractors are dirty pigs. Don't get me wrong. They leave the place in an absolute state. But like I said, how much damage can you do in 2 weeks? And then if they're really, really bad, we're taking deposits and protection waivers and all of that stuff so that we can take the money from the guests. And worst case, we can just kick them out, which is leading to my second point is protection for tenants. This is my second reason I really don't like HMOs. Protection for tenants. As we know in this country, HMOs come under the Housing Act and they have protection for tenants, whereas guests do not have the same protection as tenants. What am I talking about, JP? You've got to explain this further. Let's say your tenant doesn't pay. All right, let's say they don't pay and now you're 3 months in arrears for your £700 per room HMO. Now you've got to go through the procedures of serving them notice and taking these guys to court and getting an eviction notice, which is a lot of time, effort and money. And yes, there are protection options out there. There are insurances, there are agencies. So if you choose to do that, it's probably a very wise move. But the protection for tenants is almost, in my opinion, way superior than the protection for the building owner, for the person that owns this, for the landlord, for you as the investor, as the property entrepreneur, whatever. So the protection far outweighs for tenants than it does for landlords. Now over here with guests, there is no guest protection in terms of Housing Act. There is nothing. If these guys don't pay, we are legally allowed to get them out. They are trespassing on our property. We can pay a security firm to go in and get them out. We can change the locks. No problem, not breaking any laws. Obviously, that is the last straw. Don't get me wrong. You don't want to be faced with that situation, but you can have a conversation to say, hey guys, you haven't paid your bill or you're breaking our house rules. Maybe you're smoking inside. Maybe you're doing drugs. Worst case, it could be a party, something like that. You can immediately cut the power. You can immediately change the locks. You can immediately send in security and get these guys out, okay? I like that flexibility, okay? The third thing, let me just consult my list. This list is way bigger, actually. This is a bit more technical, okay? Amount of investment. Now, I have to caveat this. This is only for purchases, okay? Because rent to rent here and rent to rent here, somewhat the same, okay? Somewhat the same. So you're gonna be spending the same amount here as the same amount there. I ain't talking about that. I'm talking about acquiring property. If it's your strategy to acquire property and you're gonna run it as a HMO or you're gonna run it as an Airbnb, I think you need a lot more investment for your HMO than you do for your Airbnb. Why, JP? Please tell me more, okay? Here's why, and I'm not going to teach you how to do HMO in detail because it's not my strategy and there are experts out there. We have those experts in the host network as a recommendation. So if HMO is your thing, talk to us. In the host network, I can tell you who to go to. But anyway, here's why I think the amount of investment is much, much bigger here, which puts me off than it is here. In HMO, you're very likely to either do this and get a low to medium product. Okay, and in 2026, a low to medium product does not cut it. It does not cut it. You have to do this one, which is a high-end product, okay? Buy a house, full conversion. Take the floors out, take the walls out, take the kitchen out, the bathroom, everything. You almost walk in and you can just see the roof. That's it. You see the back of the house, you see the roof, you can see a hole in front of you. You have to start again. The money that you need to do that, let's say you buy a house for 250,000 and then you need 150,000 just to put it back together. You're £400,000 in to a property on a street where it might be somewhat 250, 300 for the average house price, okay? Let's forget about that for a minute. You're £400,000 in. For me, that amount of investment is huge. Okay, I like to spend that kind of money when I've got that kind of money, or at least 25% of that kind of money. I don't like to spend that kind of money when I'm starting out and when I'm at zero. Why is Airbnb different? We're not talking about rent to rent. We're talking about purchase, okay? Well, we're not purchasing for 250 and spending 150. We're more likely purchasing the 250 and spending 20,000. okay? Lick of paint, change bathroom maybe, furnish it, you're 270 in, here you're 400,000 in. Yes, you can get some of this money out. I get the commercial conversion, the commercial refinance model. I get it. But that leads me on to my next point. Okay, my next point is over leverage or over borrowed, over leveraged. In my opinion, I never ever like the idea of being over leveraged. In HMO, you are over leveraged. In Airbnb, you're buying a standard house or you're doing a standard renovation. Okay, now again, I don't like to talk about this one because a low to medium style product just doesn't cut it in 2026. It may have done in 2015, but not in 2026, okay? So over leveraged, what am I talking about, JP? Well, if you refinance on a commercial mortgage and you get commercial refinance, you're gonna get some very sexy valuations. You hear people in HMO talk about valuations. Oh my God, my £250,000 house has now been valued at 550,000, yada, yada, yada. That doesn't sit well with me. It doesn't sit well because now you're going to borrow 75% of this big number, whatever that number is. I've written two different numbers, but you're going to borrow 75% of that big number. Your house, your average house on that street is nowhere near that number. It's nowhere near, okay? Personally, my belief, I don't like that. It doesn't sit well with me. I don't like it. That doesn't happen in Airbnb because you're either buying a normal house or you're doing like a BRR, which is a buy, renovate, refinance. So you're adding value to the house. You're taking it up to, you know, the maximum value for the street, whatever. It's a very different model than this one here. So I don't like the amount of investment it needs to go in. And I don't like the way it's over leveraged. And then you're kind of controlled by the bank. The bank has all the say. And then you're going to struggle to sell. You're only going to sell it as a HMO. You cannot sell that as a family house anymore. You're only going to sell to an investor. The appetite to sell has to be there. I instantly feel trapped. I don't know about you. I don't like that. I feel trapped. Okay, number 5. I don't like this, and this is very personal to me. You often have to rip old houses apart. Now, HMO guys, I can hear you screaming at me now. I don't like this one. Old houses tend to be perfect for HMOs. They're bigger, they're taller, they're wider, they're perfect for proportions, they're beautiful to look at. And then I see these pictures on Instagram and Facebook of people doing this. They're buying these big, beautiful houses and they're doing a full renovation. They're ripping out fireplaces, coving, architectural features. And I'm just like, oh my God, I hate that. So for me, I don't want to rip out features just to cram in 7, 8 rooms so that I can get my multiplier, which is to do with this. I actually, over here in Airbnb, I want to celebrate this. I want to celebrate the old features because that's what Airbnb is about. Quirkiness, different spaces, different quality of properties, things like that. This is a big one. This is a big one. Number 6, if one room is empty, is vacant to use an agent word, you often wipe out your HMO profit, okay? Again, all you HMO people that are pros are gonna be screaming at me, but I have seen this time and time again. People move out of their 6-month agreements. People move out of their HMOs. If one room is empty, all of your profit can be wiped out. Okay, all of your profit can be wiped out. Now I get over here, yes, but if your whole Airbnb is empty, then all of your profit's going to be wiped out. Yeah, but we work on a 70% occupancy strategy a lot of the time, or we work on a long stay contractor, so that 70% applies to the year, not the month. Okay, so we want the gaps, so we can clean it and maintain it and get it up to our standard. But over here, you never ever want a gap because you're thinking my profit is gone. And I hate that level of pressure. The final point I want to say is why Airbnb beats HMO every time is cash flow. Cash flow amount. You can just make more revenue in Airbnb than you can in HMO. You can make more revenue in Airbnb than you can in HMO. Like the last point, if you get one room empty, you're already at your break even. However, if you're full, you might make £1,000 net profit per month. In Airbnb, especially if you're doing this one especially, commercial conversion, or just buying a standard place or rent to rent, as you saw in my last video, you can make way more than £1,000, which then leads me to say scalability. Yeah, scale. Why scale? Why is scale better in Airbnb than it is in HMO? Because to do one of these can take up to 2 years. All right. And I'm not talking about a new build, which should probably take even longer. And I'm not talking about a commercial conversion, which can take even longer and wipe you out, as can a new build, right? Both of these can wipe you out. Same risk here. Both can wipe you out. So it's not just one. But this kind of project can take, on average, 18 months, I would say. Maybe 12. Let's just be fair to the HMO guys that are going to be shouting at the telly. Let's just say 12 months, okay? 12 months. You don't want to rent HMO because there's so much compliance that it doesn't really favor well for rent to rent. Over here, as we know, Airbnb really favors rent to rent. This is very little changes that we need to make to the property. So if you're buying and rent to rent in, your purchase, all right, still takes a lot of time, 3 months, maybe 6 months. But once you've got it, you can Airbnb straight away. And your rent to renting in the meantime means your scalability factor is huge. HMO is slow, it's for lower profits. Airbnb can be much faster for much higher cash flow amounts, so much higher profits, okay? So scale in Airbnb, in my opinion, is far, far better than it is in HMO. Now, before I poo-poo HMO anymore, let me talk about a few pros. Let me talk about a few pros of this. I think if you've got yourself 10 of these, you're in a really, really, really good position. I'm not saying HMO is not a strategy to pursue. If you're really good at raising finance, okay? If you're really good at raising finance, if you're patient, yeah, if you're really patient, if you love tenants, I'm only joking. Nobody loves tenants, okay? No one loves tenants, literally no one. No one loves tenants. So if you're really good at raising finance and you're patient and you love, I don't know if I can spell this, certainty, you love certainty. HMO is a really strong strategy for you. Really strong strategy. Why certainty? Because this versus this, the fluctuation of Airbnb, naturally we're looking to operate at 70%, which means for 8 days of the month, we're usually empty. If you love certainty, that ain't gonna sit well with you. You like to know that all 6 of your little hen boxes are full all of the time and you're getting your £800 at the end of the month or whatever. Now here, you might get £400 one month, you might get £2,000 the next month, you might get £600 the next month. That is a fluctuating market. This is way more certain. Even if your one tenant moves out, you're certain to break even. And even if 2 tenants move out, you're probably certain that you're only losing X. Okay, so there's a lot more fluctuation. That is where HMO is really strong, really positive. And if you got 10 of these, you're probably sitting in a really good position. I want to just conclude with this. I need to make some space. So let me make some space here. If this is your business, if you usually do one or the other, right? There's very few people that have got successful Airbnb businesses and successful HMO businesses. And if you have, kudos to you. But you either do one channel or the other. Now with HMO, you can stack your assets. So you could get a load of assets in the same way that you can with Airbnb. Okay. You could then move into management. Okay, so you could move into management for HMO. You could manage your own properties in the same way as I did back in that other video, how I got from 0 to 100K. I then became the management agent. Okay, so you can stack your assets and then you can move into management in both strategies. Okay, as we know, you can do rent to rent in both, but I massively favor rent to rent in Airbnb versus rent to rent in HMO. One, because of the amount of money to make a HMO compliant and to make it from this to this high level product is probably not a good strategy to go from someone else's house, spending all that money, making it beautiful just to compete with the local market. Whereas in Airbnb, you could just rent a really nice property. You could just, from the off, you could just rent a really nice property. You don't have to change anything. Okay, so rent to rent, you could do in both. I much prefer Airbnb. Okay, you could do conversions in both, we know that. You could do new builds in both, we know that. In Airbnb, you could start a staging business. You could also do that in HMO, or you could start a staging business which feeds both, okay? In Airbnb, you could be an optimization specialist. Oh my God, choose easy words, specialist. What am I talking about? This is something that you cannot do in HMO. People all around the world need optimization specialists in Airbnb. People to look at listings and pricing and revenue and make sure that you are at the top of your game, top performer and all of that. So everybody's Airbnb listing needs some intel like this. Not everybody has this level of intel. The biggest management companies will have this level of intel within their team. Okay, so we've got that in Pure Stay. The host network, that's where we will talk about this kind of thing a lot. This doesn't really exist in HMO. A lot of people just give it to their agent, or they try and just put their rooms on, whatever marketing channel they would put their rooms on. But optimization specialists in Airbnb is huge. Optimizing your listings and your pricing and all of that. You could also have direct bookings, a direct bookings agency. Now, the word agency might skew your view. It's essentially you can sell bookings to other operators and you can take whatever fee you want, between 10 and 20%. We've done some deals where we advertise that we take that, and the other end, the host is happy with what we give a booking. So we will find a booking. We will find, I always use this example, but we will find 8 engineers coming from Poland, which we've got in a property right now. And they will say, Pure Stay, here's our budget. And we take that budget and then we look at the local market and we see what level of margin there is. So if they give me a budget of, let's say, £10,000 for 2 months stay, and then I look at the market and go, okay, well, I can book you in somewhere that's £6,000 for 2 months stay. I speak to the host, I offer the booking, and I say, we take a 10% fee. But it's not 10%, it's 10% to them. So they get £6,000 minus 10% because that's our fee. But we're also taking the margin between here and here. So that's a £4,000 fee. So we're making £4,600 on one booking. Okay, now that is a direct bookings agency. Yes, it takes staff. Yes, it takes knowledge and expertise and systems and connections and CRMs and all of that stuff. But it's within the industry. You cannot do it here and you can do it here, all right? So why am I saying optimization and direct bookings? Management, we know you can do in both. Asset stacking, you can do in both. Rent to rent, I'm gonna say, is only really Airbnb. Only if you wanna compete, because no one wants a low quality HMO. Staging, you can do in both. I think there's more business in Airbnb than there is in HMO, but I'll stand corrected if someone thinks I'm wrong. Optimization specialist, you only need in Airbnb, and direct bookings agency, you only need in Airbnb. That is another reason, or those 3 things are another reason why I think Airbnb beats HMO every single time, on top of all the list that I've already given you, which is basically, I don't like tenants. I don't like the protection that tenants get. I don't like having to leverage so much money from the bank for a HMO. I don't like having to borrow my entire business infrastructure financially from a third party. And I certainly don't like the way that if one tenant drops, my profit is gone. Whereas over here, I've got all the control, I've got all the flexibility, I've got all the potential for growth, and I've got more revenue streams in my business, because the more professional you become, the more staff you get, the more sales teams that you can build, and then the growth and the income is exponential. So I hope that's clear. That's my opinion. I'd love you to comment and tell me why HMO is way better than Airbnb in your opinion. And yeah, if you haven't seen that other video, go back and watch, see how I built my business from 0 to £100,000 plus per month using this strategy and not this one. I'll see you in the next video.